Hello.
Hi, Renee.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Virus of Racism. My name is Renee Hobbs, and I'm delighted that you have decided to join us today. I'm just doing a little bit of setting up so that we can stream this meeting on YouTube Live, just in case we have folks who want to be able to watch it live. So that's kind of cool. I think it's only the first time or second time I've ever done that. I'm really, really excited about it.
What's your favorite sport? Explain why it's your favorite. Or you compare important sporting events and decide which one you both want to choose.
I'm going to mute everybody. I'm really excited about it. Okay. Does seem to be working. There we go. It does seem to be working now, so I guess we can officially begin. Many of you are here for this session because of the great session that we had on June 15th. And so I'm just sharing my screen with you now. We're going to be moving through a really cool, like, conversational learning experience, and it really has a terrific structure. We'll start with some opening remarks from Tisha Lewis Ellison and myself. We'll then really reflect on what has been going on in our world that's making us more aware of structural racism and the ways in which law enforcement, schools, and society perpetuate the virus of racism in really harmful ways. We'll do an emotional check-in to reflect a little bit on where we're at in terms of our own feelings and thoughts and actions related to this. And then the meat of this dialogue is not a sit and get kind of thing. You're here because you want to engage in dialogue, and that's what we're going to do. You'll work in a small group breakout room, introduce yourselves, and personally address one of a couple of questions we have about your understanding of race and identity. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Tisha, who's going to make some opening remarks. Tish, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I trust you all are doing well and that you can hear me. Well, welcome to the second installment of the Virus of Racism, where we're going to be having courageous conversations about denouncing racism in our teaching practices, but also in our personal lives. So we want to, as Renee mentioned, we want to stimulate this conversation, but into movement, because we have a lot of work to do. So I want to say that a lot of things have happened since our last webinar on June the 15th, publicly as well as behind the scenes. So for instance, there have been a range of organizations and corporations who have publicly acknowledged and supported that, hey, oh my gosh, something is happening in this world regarding race and racism. I've actually heard people mention the word racism. I've heard them mention white supremacy, anti-Blackness, which is like this denial or inability to recognize the humanity of Black people. I've actually heard people mention the Black Lives Matter movement. I've seen commercials of organizations saying that they're going to be providing scholarships and donations to uplift the Black community. And so I thought this was really interesting, even to the point that my husband and I, we were watching the Daytime Emmy Awards. And most of the white actors who won, they actually focused on the recent racial tensions and injustices around the world. We also saw that Procter and Gamble, they're doing away with the Aunt Your Mama symbol, knowing that it comes from those racist and stereotypical mammy images and the character and how Hollywood saw Black women. For many of us, we saw this 81-second video of the NFL commissioner who publicly apologized and said, you know what, he made a mistake. He didn't listen to the players discuss their experiences about the racial injustices, that he was going to be making some changes. He was going to be personally calling people, players, for instance. And so while we've heard about these action steps that have occurred around the world, I think that it's a good start to a long recovery road of the historical racism that this country has faced, has endured, and even has welcomed. Because to my understanding, I still don't know what happened to the killers who, or the police officers who killed Breonna Taylor. Have you? We've got work to do. We still have to remove Confederate generals and racist presidents' names off of buildings, like in my College of Education, building. We also have to remove Confederate flags and statues that have been a symbol of hate, and the fact that this world was built on the backs of Black people. So the Black Lives Matter movement is not just about police brutality. It's about advocating, it's about bringing freedom, liberation, justice to African Americans. And so on the other hand, behind the scenes, there have been folk who have publicly shared that, you know what, George Floyd, didn't he die some time ago? Why are people still talking about it? Can't we move on from this? Why are we still mentioning this today? That was from an educator. That happened for real. There was another incident of a white teacher who admitted that she was very uncomfortable discussing Juneteenth, which talks about the Emancipation Proclamation for Black people, and asked a Black teacher to help her find some video resources. Well, this white teacher did not use that same video. As a matter of fact, it was about 1 minute, this video that she chose to show to her students, right? And it cut out just a whole bunch of information about this historical event that happened in American history, actually censored the voices of just Americans, okay? And so I have to say, like, white faculty, administrators, librarians, teachers, we have to stop asking Black people to do the work that you should do, like we do, right? And so the list that Renee shared that I helped to spearhead on the Google Doc, that was there for everyone to not only just take those resources, but for you to add those resources as well. I do want to share that there was another educator, a white educator, said to a Black educator, I don't understand what's the whole fuss about the Aunt Your Mama. I grew up, using that syrup. What's wrong with that? I never saw anything racist. Well, the Black educator said, so if you don't mind me asking, you are Jewish, correct? And she said, yes. And she said, well, what if that syrup was called Hitler's syrup? And immediately, the way that this Black educator described this to me, she saw a different demeanor in this other educator, where she actually saw her back down and humble herself. And she said, you know what? I got it. I totally understand what you're saying now. So as that sinks in with you, know that these stories that I'm telling you, that they actually occurred, and there are many, many more as well. And so most of these educators that I'm sharing, they're teaching children of color. And so in order to see and acknowledge and understand and move from an anti-Blackness state of mind and being, we've got to see this as a heart issue. You have to want to see the humanity of Black people, just like you want to see the humanity for yourself and for other individuals from other populations. And so racism is not going to change until Black people are no longer seen as a threat or not human. So yes, Black lives should matter, and Black lives do matter. But the question really is, everyone, is, are Black lives equal? Okay, so in this interactive webinar, you're going to break into groups as a team to brainstorm about action steps that you would like to see occur, not only in your classrooms or in your libraries, but in your spheres of influence and in society. So we want you to see them or take these action steps. Think of them as grievances, right? I want you to think about what has occurred in the nation today. I would like for you to think about what it feels like to know that someone has come into your home while you were asleep, raided your home like the police did. And this is what happened to Breonna Taylor, coming in and killing her. And again, the police have not been arrested yet. I want you to be Breonna Taylor as you're in these breakout groups. I also want you to think about Ahmaud Arbery. I want you to be him for a second. I want you to think about the liberties that you have to walk in your neighborhood, to walk in your community and run in your community, and to know that somebody is coming after you to hunt you down like an animal and then kill you, which is what happened with him. And I want you to think about George Floyd. I want you to be George Floyd for a couple of minutes. And I want you to imagine this public lynching that occurred, in which you see this police officer putting his knee on your neck. Can you imagine that? Because I've imagined that. And sucking the lifeline out of you in public. I want you to know that there are countless others that may not have been recorded, okay? But that things like this have already happened to them, something similar, in other words. So when you're in these breakout sessions, don't see it as like a check-off list, but see it as, a way in which you can break down these power structures that have been in place for centuries, okay? And I want you to think about, like, hey, what's really in my heart? I see people do this all the time, and that's wonderful, but what does that really mean? What's in your heart when you speak? What's in your heart when you discuss issues of racism? And so I want us to think about the fact that white silence is racism. Thank you.
That is a really powerful way for us to start, Tisha. And in some ways, now it's really clear to you, I'm sure, why we call these courageous conversations. Before we work in our breakout groups, though, we'd like you to complete a little poll. You can do this very easily by answering this question: how is your soul today? Go to slido.com and type in the hashtag DigiURI, and you'll be presented with the opportunity to take the live poll. Reflecting on your emotional experiences and your feelings about racial injustice takes courage. and we have to be honest and show our feelings. We've got people weighing in here. I think you can see the live poll, Tisha, as people are answering their response. We don't have too many golden. We're troubled, and we're in a very interesting place. The answers are coming in here. We've got 11 people who have voted. Now it's up to 14. We're in a complicated emotional place
Wow.
as we struggle with the virus of racism.
Really telling.
Yep. Thank you so much for weighing in. We'll kind of look back at this poll as we get to the end of our dialogue. But in the small group breakout sessions that we're suggesting right now, we'd like you to address. This is, I think, the wrong set of slides here, but this will probably do quite well enough. Tisha, if you can, will you restate the focus question that you want us to address while I put the link into the chat room, so that if you're so inclined, you can annotate and make notes about your conversation in your small group.
Sure. So we had 3 questions. And I think it's probably best that you, depending on time, because a lot of you all are going to have lots of different conversations, and you want to meet who's in your breakout group. So one question is, what does race, or how do you have it? Or you?
I think so. Yep. I'm going to try to put it up now on the screen here. There are the 3 questions. You see them now on the I haven't yet shared my screen with you. Sorry about that. Multitasking. There they are, Tisha.
Perfect. Yeah. So how does your race influence who you are? Let's think about that. Like, who are you in the group? And share some of your experiences there. How do you humanize the people who are different from you? This is what I mentioned before. Like, if you can't recognize the humanity of the Black community, Indigenous people, other groups of individuals, I mean, that says a lot. That speaks volumes. So how are you humanizing the people who look different from you and who are different from you? And then what can I do to address anti-Blackness and racial prejudice in your own life?
Let's get that. Terrific. So you can see that we've I made some blank slides for you to, if you would like. It's not required, but sometimes it can be helpful to have a note taker who is moving us through that process. So I'm going to now break you up into groups. Please introduce yourself before you begin to chat. We're going to take about 20 minutes for this conversation, so enough time for you to share as authentically as you can. If you will, please give me a thumbs up to show me that you understand the task that we're about to engage into. We like to use the thumbs up. I see Lisa puts her thumb up. I see lots of thumbs up, so we're ready to break into breakout rooms now. Here we go. Click on the link to join your breakout room, introduce yourself to your new friends, and I hope you have a meaningful conversation. Okay, Roque and Felicia, I hope that you join the breakout room now. That would be terrific. Mhm. Okay.
Probably not, because I got a 2-year-old yelling.
Okay, I'll go first. My name is Lynn. I live in New Jersey. I'm director of the Kids Bridge Tolerance Center. We educate youth in anti-bias, anti-racism, diversity, bullying prevention, and all those other good social emotional skills.
I'll go. I'm Kathy Leo Grand. I'm in upstate New York, Syracuse area. I'm a teacher educator at a small Jesuit school. We're grappling with, we had some open discussions. We've had a lot of insidious, very covert racial stuff at our school. And we had some open conversations that the president ran, and they were terrible to listen, to be part of. They were very difficult to be part of. Alumni from 20 years ago, and things haven't changed. So we're really struggling. We look like this nice social justice school, and it's not like that below the surface. So I'm a teacher educator, so I do a lot of that stuff in my classes, but there's a bigger picture that I need to be part of now.
Hi, Nelda Ormond. Unfortunately, you can't see me on purpose because I don't look presentable, but I am vocal coordinator for the vocal area at the University of the District of Columbia, of course, in Washington, D.C. And I'm very interested in this because I am on a division committee called Diversity. And so this is what we have been doing all summer, having sessions on diversity and the different way we see race and ethnicities and different people of different backgrounds and so forth. So it's been very informative, and it's been very interesting and very enlightening.
I can go now. I'm Tanya Fonseca, and I'm from, right now I'm working in London, the United Kingdom. And what I do is I teach lectures. I'm a senior lecturer, but one of my work is to teach lectures on how to teach, but having an inclusive and diversity approach to learning and teaching. So we started 2 years ago to use the attainment gaps, so the difference on the degrees that white students and non-white students have, and we fixed the demographics, we fixed the social background, and there's still a gap between white and non-white. So we try to work with staff to reduce that gap. But here in the UK, people don't use the word racism, so not even structural racism or systemic racism. So it's quite difficult to go and teach about racism without saying that there's a systemic racism. So sometimes it's like, for me, it's quite strange. I'm still trying to learn how to do that. And those are very difficult conversations, especially because I'm teaching, I'm from education, so my expertise is in education, and I'm teaching, people from geology, from biology, from other areas where they will say, well, my area is not racist. I'm from science, so we are not, there's no bias, there's nothing. So what you're saying doesn't make any sense. So it's quite difficult. So every time that I have an opportunity to be with others that can help me do my work, I much appreciate. I'm very welcome. So nice to meet you all.
Yes. My name is Reese Dominic. I live in Vermont. I've been working as a media literacy consultant in New York City for many years now, and I integrate production and teach media literacy through production in schools all around New York City. So I'm in very diverse environments, but racism and inequities have been beneath the surface of what we teach and it have been sort of quiet in the environment. And it seems like a moment where schools, for the first time, I'm witnessing as this incident, along with school closures, have come, that people are outwardly talking about injustice and inequities and racism in the school system. And so it's an exciting moment to try and bring this stuff to the surface and apply media literacy as a way to have conversations around it. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. I might get called away because I'm on childcare duty right now too, which is the new norm.
My little guy's watching a dinosaur video right behind me. Can see his head probably. Anyway, my name is Janae Chiswick Aguero. I'm joining in from Philadelphia, and I'm interested in this topic. I've been involved a lot with intergroup dialogue for probably the last 30 years. So this is slightly different, but there's overlaps and parallels in that really getting at people's experiences and where hurt is, and opening up, being transparent, and people really connecting and talking about things. So I'm the founder of a teen magazine. It's a bilingual magazine called Motivos, and started 14 years ago here in Philadelphia. Sorry? But it's used by schools all over the country. And so it's a media mentorship program, really helping youth find their voice, determine their destiny. And a lot of what we do is intergroup dialogue, and the students are deciding their stories that, you know, best tell and shape the narrative of their communities. So it's very much a part of our dialogue and training with the young people. And then I serve on 2 boards that I think this is actually 3 where it's really relevant. Actually, all of the boards it's super relevant on like 6 boards. But one is the Free Library of Philadelphia. And we're really addressing, you know, institutional racism and what that looks like from a government perspective, from a library perspective. Another board I serve on is a charter school. And students started, you know, an expose, you know, type of Instagram. So we're really trying to figure out how best to have dialogue and recruit from a broader, deeper pool, and encourage students to go into education as well. And I serve on a board at my alumni, my alma mater rather, at Cornell University. And it's been interesting to see the work that they're doing and have been doing for many, many years. So it's all in the back of my head whenever I'm at the board meetings, like, how can I speak up? How can I advocate? How can, you know, the work that I'm doing be applicable and relevant and help others see more, help myself see more. And then I'm on a parent policy council for this little guy's daycare. And there's definite disparities there in how outreach happens and how parents are engaged or not engaged. And it relates a lot to people's backgrounds and experiences and expectations. And a lot of that is just embedded in the system. So very interested, glad to be here, hoping to contribute and to learn.
So we have 20 minutes, right? Is that what you said, 20-25? With 3 questions. So I would say everybody should take a minute to answer each question. Does that sound good? Hearing no objection, who wants to go first? How does your race influence who you are? Janae, you want to go first?
Wow, it's such a hard question. And, you know, I do think all the way while Janae was talking, I was thinking, how did she learn to be an activist? And how did she come to feel so empowered about race and diversity issues? And I feel like my racial identity is really rooted in growing up in Detroit in the 1960s. My parents were racists. Okay, they really, really were. And as they got older, they got more racist, right? And so I do feel like I have spent a lifetime sort of recognizing how the virus of racism has been part of my white privilege for my whole life, right? And how easy it is for me to set it aside as like not my issue, Like, I'm an activist on a whole lot of important things like media literacy, right? But somehow on this issue, it always was something like I could set that aside. So I feel like my race influences my perception that I'm somehow not part of this conversation. And so I feel like the big aha for me in the last 6 months, year, has really been to embrace that more fully. And I feel like I am aware of how desensitized I am about this issue, because I made my first media literacy documentary after the Rodney King beating, and using the Rodney King beating as a chance to do media literacy and look at how the media so distorted our understanding of that incredible event. But I feel like I have become so desensitized to police brutality for targeting African Americans that I now am sort of realizing, like, how do I reclaim that, right? How do I reclaim that empathy? How do I reclaim that humanity? So that's where these questions all kind of blur together, at least for me.
Who wants to go next? Reese, are you there? You have to unmute yourself, guys. Who wants to go next?
I can go next. So my father is Black African and my mother is white European. And I was raised in a very white context where my father was the only Black person. And I only had to define my ethnicity or my identity when I started to apply for jobs in the UK, because they ask for our identity or ethnicity. And I had to stop and think, okay, how do I see myself? Is it white? Is it mixed? Is it Black? And it was a process, and I had to make a decision. And I decided to go for mixed, because if the idea is to collect data on how non-white people are treated, it makes more sense for me to say, yes, I'm mixed. But I know that because I'm not too dark, people react to me differently than they react to parts of my family or friends that are darker than me. So I can see that there's already a difference just, by the tone of my skin. But I also understand that I'm never seen as white, because I'm not that white, and I have a lot of African features that people will identify as that. So I also see that I'm not from that privileged side. So it's always somewhere in between, but I've experienced the fact of being discriminated based on my ethnicity, on the color of my skin, but I also benefited from not being too dark. So that would be my answer to my first question. So it's still a thing. And I think it's always working in progress. So I still happening, my identity versus my positionality. It's always a process.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Who wants to go next? Kathy? Unmute.
I didn't get to introduce myself, so I'll just slide in a little bit of what I do. I'm a career advisor at the University of Rhode Island, and one of the reasons I'm in the group is I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can for all of my students, for my students of color, for my students of different cultural and racial backgrounds. And so that's what's bringing me here. My knowledge of the subject, I guess, if you will, or comfort in speaking with it, is limited because I'm always afraid that I'm going to say the wrong thing, use the wrong word, offend someone in terms of what I'm saying. I did grow up in a real small town in Rhode Island. I think we had 3 Black families in town growing up. And we all just played together and we all interacted together. And maybe it was superficially, but I never drew any distinctions because that's just not how our town worked. So to realize that there's a big different world out there and people aren't as nice, or maybe there's stuff under the rug that I never thought about. I just need to get more versed and more comfortable in talking to everyone.
Kathy, you want to go next?
Yeah, I was identifying with what Renee said. I was always the liberal in a family of racist Republicans. And, but then that becomes your identity. And I think it's almost like it's a skin you put on. And so this has been really interesting. My children are Asian. So I've seen a lot of, they don't get the same kind of discrimination as African Americans do, but they get discrimination. And so that becoming a multicultural family, we fly the Korean and American flag on the front of our houses, which is on Main Street. We've gotten a lot of comments about, is that a communist flag and things like that. So I'm always surprised. I don't know why I'm always surprised. I'm 66 and I keep getting surprised by people, you know, saying, I'm going to say stupid things, ignorant, uneducated things. And I do live in a very small town area. So we deal with a lot of Native American issues. We have a lot of the land claims going on and people very angry about the Cayugas having land claims. And so I guess my racial identity, I've always felt comfortable with, and I think that's a bad, like I'm discovering now, I shouldn't be as comfortable. Yes, I did a lot, but I loved what, what's her name said? I can't think of her name. Silence is racism. And I think that's where I am right now, is recognizing that, yeah, I did a lot of things, but I also stayed quiet a lot of times when I shouldn't. So I'm revisiting my racial identity, I think.
Thank you. Janae, you want to go? And now,
Sure.
George, if you want to participate, please unmute yourself.
So how does your race influence who you are? I think kind of identify with Kathleen and that growing up, I don't know that it really did. And then when we got to college applications and it says choose a race, my mom's side is Spanish Italian, so we could put Hispanic, but we didn't really grow up immersed in Hispanic culture. My mom separated herself from her family for her own reasons in terms of distance and what she was surrounded by. And then my dad's side is Polish Hungarian. So I think, I don't know what I put for race actually, when you have to identify. Now I would put Hispanic if it counts toward more Latina entrepreneurs, for example. So I think if it helps someone, I'll put myself in that pool, which I can. So it was a very small town though, largely Republican. I wouldn't like say people are intentionally racist. I think it's more of an not a lot of exposure, right? So as I became more exposed, I studied abroad in Japan my senior year in high school. So I was the only one like me, and I couldn't speak because I didn't know the language for 3 months, you know? And so I think that influenced me when I got to Cornell. And there was like a reverse culture shock, and my desire to do kind of intergroup dialogue and really give voice to populations or groups that weren't getting a voice. And then starting the magazine, it's a similar thread in that underserved, especially Hispanic youth with opportunity gaps and their narrative not being heard in media and not having a lot of voice in decision-making rooms, how could I affect that? How could I change that? And with my own family, it taking 3 generations to get to college after arriving in this country, was there something I could do to kind of bring opportunity through kind of down the levels to the place of a starting point for new immigrants, and also how to help create, provide, co-create a platform for stories and narratives to be heard. So now it's interesting because I think interpersonal racism is different than institutional racism. So I'm trying to, I think, get people on, at least rally behind institutional racism so that people aren't taking going on the defensive automatically, but diving into how can we all be on the same page? But at the same time, I know from, it's just in everyone, right? We all have biases. We all discriminate somehow, whether it's in our mind or actually coming out in some manner. And so just want to be more conscious of that as well.
Thank you. All right. Does anybody want to join in and unmute Reese or George? Akila, just joined us, or Frank, which looks like musical chairs, Renee. Okay, Frank, you're on.
Oh, I was just waving hello.
Oh,
I don't really know what the conversation is.
so
Is there a
the question is, how does your race influence who you are, your race?
gosh, in every way, I think. I think it identifies me and gives me obviously white male privilege, and it challenges me to be sensitive and up my empathy to be aware of the people that are not that are not like me, and to learn from them. And my challenge has been to be a better listener, especially through the past months, and to learn and to kind of keep my mouth shut sometimes.
Listen, active listening sounds better.
Yeah.
Very nice. Anybody else with us?
Hi, everyone. My name is Aquila Hamilton. I joined a little late. I would say that for me, it's understanding that depending on who my audience is, I can come off as a threat. So as a Black woman, I'm 5'9", so I have height to me. And when I would coach my staff at times, I can literally say something that my white counterpart could say, and it'll turn off that, oh, you were being aggressive or you were being defensive. And the reality is I'm answering a question that you asked, right? And I had to learn that, okay, lower my tone sometimes when I speak, or sit down when I have to deliver a tough coaching message, if I have to write someone up so they don't feel like I am kind of doing a personal attack. I was never a fan of, let me backtrack a little bit, I'm sorry. I used to be a manager, so I had a staff underneath me. And I was never a fan of like the sandwich method of, let me tell you the good that you did, the bad, and then the good, because I feel people forget all about the bad. So I always had to figure out a way to give my coaching messages where the outcome can be, hey, you know what, this is what you need to work on. But yes, I understand the good that you're doing, but I need you to focus on the area of opportunity. Before, when I would give messages, it would just always be, oh, I feel like she's being negative and I can never do anything right. And I'm like, that's not the intent of the message, but I don't want to pacify what's going on just because you don't grasp the full concept or maybe you don't agree. So being conscious and cognizant of my height, my color, the tone of my voice at times when I speak has definitely affected the way in business, period.
Thank you for sharing. So anybody else on mute? I'm going to share my experience because it's a little bit different. I mean, of course I'm white and I have white privilege. I have a religious affiliation that growing up made me feel like the other. But I would say I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey, a very integrated community. My school was integrated, maybe half African-American, half white. And I grew up with Black people, knowing them as kids, as human beings, and the integration of children. And as you know, we live in a really segregated society. If we could aspire to have children, be with other children of mixed races and ethnicities, I mean, it's a lesson that lasts a lifetime. So I just wanted to share that with you. All right, who else do we got? So Renee, should we go to question 2?
I can.
Oh, Reese, good. Thanks for jumping in.
Hey, I'm back. I just would, I'm realizing through all the conversations since George Floyd and in this moment, how I can have my privilege is to be able to step into conversations and out of conversations as an activist. Where people of color don't have that luxury. And I want to challenge myself. You know, I grew up in the South. I went from New York to Orlando, Florida, and sort of stood out as or didn't fit in exactly to the good old boy network there, and was shocked by how openly racist people were around other white people. And I felt like an activist simply by participating in culture with people of color and befriending people, and that has sort of carried into my work, where I feel I have felt like a passive activist almost in being able to enter different communities and do my work and interact with people in a way that feels effective. But I feel like there's a level that I need to go now that's more necessarily vocal and this seems like a moment where there's a lot of talk amongst or necessarily between white people about how we do that within uncomfortable spaces, uncomfortable white spaces. Being more vocal when I hear when I have an opportunity and not finding convenient ways to be silent and yeah, I'm not landing the plane there exactly, but I think hopefully you get where I'm coming from.
Reese, I really appreciate that point because I feel like that is addressing that third question. What can I do to address anti-Blackness and racial prejudice in my own life? And I feel like that, I like the way you describe, I feel like I have the same situation where it's sometimes I engage on this issue, but sometimes I don't, right? And that privilege of being able to sort of choose when and how to engage around racial inequalities and especially structural racism that is built in to the fabric of the town that I live in, okay? Just saying. I feel like, now I feel like I have to recognize that it's not like, that is a kind of silence, right? And I feel like that's the place where like really fully owning that pushes me to do something besides just every once in a while. And like you said, of being a passive activist, I thought that phrase, that felt like that kind of resonated with me. So thank you for sharing that.
Anybody else? We can go on to question 2, empathy. How do you humanize the people who are different from you? How do you actively humanize people?
You know, I was a middle school assistant principal a while ago, and I used to take great pride in that I didn't judge people in any different way, no matter who they were or what they were. And I had an incident with a young 10-year-old boy who had transferred into the district. Angry kid, you know, causing a lot of problems in his class. In one class in particular, and the school psychologist told me that that teacher had some racial issues and that she was singling him out. And I said, "Oh no, that can't be. You know, he's got a lot of problems, and she's a nice lady." And you know, I think, you know, and she said to me, "You know, your colorblindness is a problem." And I didn't know how to take that because I took that as a thing I was proud of. And she explained it to me, and I started becoming aware of the real problem that was in that classroom. I wound up having to carry the boy out of the classroom one day because he was flinging desks and screaming and swearing. And as I was carrying him, he was screaming and swearing at me and calling me every name he could about being a white prejudice, SOB, F, and I looked down at him and I said, "You think I'm doing this because you're black? I'm doing this because you're totally out of control, kid." And he stopped. He just stopped. And I walked him to my office and he calmed down. He needed to hear that so much. And I learned so much that day.
That's a beautiful story. All right, who's next? Empathy and humanizing the other.
Hi, I'm very happy to see that we are now at last admitting the problem, that it does exist, and discussing the problem, because I can remember when everything was swept under the rug. It was like it, and you can't begin to solve problems until you admit there is a problem. So all of this discussion this summer, I am very sorry that it's come out of such tragedies, but I feel that out of the tragedies, I'm hopeful that we will come to, in the future, to some solutions.
And to add to what Nelda just said, I also feel like we can't heal from something if we can't feel the pain. My father passed away 2 months ago, and it was a pretty traumatic journey through health institutions, rehab centers, hospice, and miscommunications between institutions and what I saw as a devaluing of human life, the way that he was treated. And so I carried that with me, and then watching what was happening with George Floyd, and the trauma and the pain kind of melded together as this, and how others were approaching me of how they could help or not help, and what they wanted to do for me that I didn't need, and what I needed they weren't asking. And I think a lot of that just showed me that we as people need to learn better how to meet people in their pain.
Thank you. Sorry about your loss. Okay, empathy, attributing humanness to the other.
I just want to underline Janae's really beautiful point. I feel like with the death of George Floyd and the whole last really 3 years, the police brutality issue just over the last 3 years, intensifying to the place of like acknowledging the pain that the overwhelming pain is something that's the place of humanizing us. And your analogy was so powerful because it was so personal, right? And it's like, yes, that's how I feel like you gave me a solution to my desensitization, right? Feeling overwhelmed with this like media saturation of one horrible police brutality situation against over and over and over. And your solution is honor the pain that these events are causing, and really honor that pain and feel that pain and live with that, feel with that. That was just really powerful for me. And I feel like, yeah, I think I'm a little afraid to do that because I think it's going to make me fucking angry. I think I'm angry and it's going to make me even angrier, just the same way you got angry at the medical system. And I guess I'm worried that, I don't know, my anger can be a problem. So I feel like I have to think about how to do it without hurting people I care about.
And I've struggled with that because then I have a foot in the world of anger and wanting to advocate strongly. And I made lots of calls to Alzheimer's Association nationally. So there's that world to live in, and the other world is one of grace and forgiveness and realizing that people say they want to help, they don't know how to help, and the things they're saying are hurting more. And you just want to write a list of this is what not to say to someone when their father dies, So which world do I want to live in? I want to live in the world of forgiveness and grace. And I'd like to advocate and be angry, but have it recorded so that Alzheimer's can use it to fill in gaps in their training, but not to use me, not to make me come out and relive the trauma. No.
So we have 5 more seconds, so we'll see you in the big room.
That was great discussion. Okay, welcome back. I bet you had a really thought-provoking discussion, and I'm sure you have a lot to say. We only have about 5 minutes remaining, and I want to give Tisha the last word, but perhaps there was an idea that came up in your small group that was particularly moving or insightful. We have time to hear from 5 of you in a very brief way. Who wants to go first?
Hey, Renee, I'm going to jump in. I chose to go last in my group, and I'm going to jump out and say I feel like we really didn't have enough time in my group. But one of the ideas that came out that I think is very important is that people need to be real with one another about where they are and what they're going through and who they are, and not try to, I don't know, just being real is important.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Jackie. Who's next? Lynn.
Okay. So my group was very thoughtful. There was a lot of discussion about pain and anger And I just want to add to that. I mean, that's okay. Like, you know, learning all this is a process. And sometimes you have to step over the anger and process the frustration to get where we're going. So I wanted to share that we were confessing emotions, strong emotions, but that's okay.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Who's next? Jump in, unmute your microphone.
Hi, Renee, it's Kristen. I can go next.
Thanks.
So our group talked a lot about empathy and humanizing individuals, and so some keynotes there were just become comfortable with being uncomfortable, but also listen to people who are different and surround yourself with people who are different and lean into being uncomfortable in those conversations. And then we just spoke a lot about educating ourselves and educating our youth as a start.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Some idea that came up in your small group that was particularly moving or important? We'll hear from two more of you. Who's next?
If I may, I'd like to echo what Jacqueline said. She and I were in a group together, and we didn't quite get to the rest of those questions like she said, but the authenticity of the conversations these have to be real conversations, because this is real pain. One of my other group mates talked about ageism. We talked about sexism. We talked about, you know, all of those isms under the sun, and they do nothing but cause pain. And each of us could be chunked into one of those groups with one of those pain-inflicting labels, and we have to have those authentic conversations to get rid of them as best we can. It's going to take a long time, and it's going to be worth it.
Thank you for sharing. Who's next? Something you want to remember about the conversation that you had today, something that was useful or important to you?
I'll share. In our group, we didn't get to all the questions, but one of the things that I think came up a lot was literature, and then and representation of people of color in literature, but not just in literature, but also thinking about your classroom environment and what messages you're sending that you're not actually speaking, but are actually being sent to students based on what you have up and around your classroom. And it could be as simple as like a how are you feeling today chart, and who are the people that are feeling positively versus who are the people that are feeling negatively on that chart. And you know, so something as simple as that is the representation. Is it reinforcing anti-Blackness when you have representatives on a how are you feeling chart that are Black, brown, or Asian, and the words are angry, scared, you know. So we talked a lot about that and how messages, unspoken or spoken, can tell children a lot.
Wow, so beautiful. Tisha, I want to have you, you can give the last word and take us out. What do you want people to be thinking about as we leave our session today? Microphone.
Okay. All right. Thank you. 5 things. One is I want us to remember that Breonna Taylor's killers are still not arrested. I think this is the 3rd time I've mentioned that in this webinar. I want us to continue to push for change. So we have this Google Doc that it will be shared with the recording, right, Renee? Yeah. So I would love for us to tear it apart, focus on those action steps, maybe a week or every month until it's completed, wherever you work and wherever you live. I also would love for us to remember the names and to call out the names of those who were killed by police and or vigilante violence. I want us to also think about, hey, do we want to continue to be political, or do we want to resist those and these oppressive and racist acts of white supremacy and racism. And the fifth thing I want to say again is white silence is racism.
Beautiful. You've given us a lot to think about. Your participation in this webinar means you understand that we are part of the problem and part of the solution, and coming together for this hour was really a meaningful step. So let's give everyone who participated a round of applause. We are grateful that you shared your time and your thoughts with us. We hope to see you again. Stay tuned to the Media Education Lab website to see what's happening later this summer. And Tisha, maybe we should do this again, huh? We'll let you guys tell us if you think it's a good idea. Send us a tweet, send us an email. If you think you want to keep in this conversation, let us know. Thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Renee, that was a great idea, and I think we should do it again.
Giving you a big hug, girl. Big hug. All right. Thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Tish, I would love to see you sometime too. Bye.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Hobbs.
I'm really glad you were able to join. Thanks again.
Thank you.